Luminous surveyed the battlefield from above. Humanity's survival hung on the outcome of this battle. Defeat meant the end, and for that very reason, they challenged it with the resolve to give everything they had. Even if you lose your limbs, even if your magicrons try, do not falter. Consider yourselves fortunate to find worth in your lives. With these words, transmitted via thought communication, Luminous inspired every warrior present. It was sophistry, and it was brainwashing. However, it was also the truth. In times of peace, many might have let such words pass and one ran out the other, but here, everyone was roused to action. That fact alone was proof that power, that justice dwelled within Luminous's words. All people seek value in their existence. Given a just cause that provides that meaning, they can press forward without fear of death. And so, the battlefield was enveloped in a mysterious fervor, the tension ripening to a fever pitch. In the north, Lewis, Gunther, Adalman, Gadra, and others were struggling against the bird soaring through dimensions Habitaki. It was such a formidable opponent that their survival upon first contact was a miracle, but thanks to Mai joining the fray, they had begun to see a path to a counterattack. In the west, Sean and her group were holding their own against the beast, dashing through the void. Kakishi, Sar and Gregory, who had been on the run, were also fighting with all their might, despite their complaints. Sar, in particular, was simultaneously maintaining a holy field. Fully aware that his fall would mean the end, he appeared to be under unimaginable pressure. The giant race, the Titan army, normally Luminous's natural enemies, were also reliable allies in this moment. With other renowned warriors present, they seemed to be gradually chipping away at the enemy force's momentum. In the south, Ultima was unrivaled against the fish swimming through the star swim. Truly impressive, Luminous thought, struck with admiration. To put it bluntly, the other forces were mere extras. Yet, they coordinated well, steadily slaughtering the endlessly spawning misshapen cryptids without getting in Ultima's way. That, in its own right, was a vital contribution. Furthermore, reinforcements led by Benimaru had arrived. As they cut down the evil god-like monsters from the other world one after another, it seemed as though the tide of battle had turned. And yet, in the east, the world-destroying dragon Ivarage remained motionless. It was quite eerily so. Luminous's hyper-intuition had been screaming maximum alarms from the very beginning. Now, however, it had gone silent. Perhaps this means the time for caution has passed. In thinking this, Luminous had correctly grasped the situation. Sound had vanished from the battlefield. The mysterious silence was shattered by a wicked raucous laugh. It was wicked, yet utterly innocent. Is true essential evil really this terrifying? Luminous's murmur spoke for the hearts of all present. It was not a debate about whether the world-destroying dragon Ivarage itself was good or evil. The problem was that its actions completely lacked any consideration for others. Without malice, it pursued only its own curiosity, its own pleasure. Such behavior was incompatible with harmony. An individual that was nearly complete, an entity wholly unaffected by the fate of anything other than itself. That was the true horror of the world-destroying dragon, Ivarage. Not just this planet, but the world itself. I suppose it has no need for any of it. If Ivarage's interests could not be piqued, all negotiation was meaningless. And if its goal was the destruction of the world, then the very actions Luminous and the others took to prevent it would only serve to amuse the world-destroying dragon. There were few beings so fitting of the description, an enemy to be exterminated. And now, a change had occurred in that enemy's presence. It's laughable. If it wanted to act the part of the mighty overlord, it should have remained motionless until the bitter end. The battlefield's equilibrium had been maintained by two factors: Luminous's resurrection magic and the world-destroying dragon Ivarage's non-participation. If that balance were to break, it would be no surprise if the entire front collapsed. This situation required a revision of tactics, but they had no such luxury. There were no forces left anywhere capable of recovering from a strategic disadvantage of this magnitude. Though, since their strategy had been the best possible option, they had no choice but to accept this outcome. King Gazel approached Luminous's side. Demon Lord Luminous, what is the plan? Do we throw our entire mobile force at Ivarage? At this question, Luminous groaned. If they took that option, they would be unable to recover if another front collapsed. Yet, if they did nothing, the collapse of the eastern front seemed inevitable. However, the situation did not wait for them to decide. It came to a head at the worst, most fatal possible moment. Wait, Ivarage's form has changed. That appearance is. As Luminous pointed out, Ivarage's appearance had altered. It was pointless to worry whether his power had increased. Even when it first appeared, its depths had been unfathomable. Ivarage descended to the ground. And its form. It looks like a beautiful woman. Do you know who that is? Gazel asked Luminous. Luminous did not answer. It was a woman she did not know, yet she looked somehow familiar. Yes. It was as if Demon Lord Milim had grown into an adult. Down on the ground, Masayuki was the first to react. No. It was not Masayuki himself, but the memories of the hero slumbering within him. Lucia. He shouted the name involuntarily, startling even himself. Who is Lucia? As soon as the thought crossed his mind, forgotten memories came flooding back. It was the name of the person who, long ago, had been his sister. Right. I mean, it makes sense I'd scream in surprise, but that's not actually her, right? The Lucia before him was a form the enemy had assumed. It seemed the situation had become quite dire, causing even Masayuki to wear a grave expression. Then, the situation descended further into chaos. At the same moment Ivarage took on Lucia's form, its 3 servants also completed their transformations. Had they truly evolved, or was everyone simply trapped in a nightmare? Even Velgren could not accurately gauge the upper limits of those 3 entities' power. It would be no surprise if everyone thought this was unreal. It was simply beyond comprehension. The anomalies didn't end there. The corpse of Jahal, which had been abandoned on the ground, began to squirm suspiciously. And finally, a mysterious presence, undetected by anyone, looked down upon the chaotic battlefield from heights far above. Haha, my wife has come back to life. My daughter will be here soon, too. The family is coming together. I won't fail this time. I have to select properly, and leave only those of value. The unknown entity whispered these words. It was a cruel pronouncement. But as of yet, there was no one on the ground who knew of it. Along with Carrere and Rain. These 3 were confronting Velzard while receiving support from Tensura. He acted as the vanguard, while Carrere and Rain served as skirmishers. The rampaging Velzard was truly a natural disaster. She had bared her true nature. She had transformed into her strongest dragon form and was raging madly, crushing everything around her. And yet, her form was beautiful. Her scales possessed a depth greater than white pearls, resembling gemstones that captivated any who looked upon them. Her eyes, once a tranquil deep sea blue diamond hue, now shone a brilliant gold with her true power unleashed. The aura exuding from her was intense. Radiating a vivid pure white brilliance, she overwhelmed the entire area with the majesty of an absolute ruler. Even in her rampaging state, she was filled with a mystique that would leave anyone spellbound. That was the unmistakable true form of the strongest true dragon, the White Ice Dragon. But even so, there was not a trace of fear in the expressions of those facing her tyranny. This was because the good news of Rimuru's return had been shared via Tensura. He was the first to react. Is that right? If that bastard is back, tell him to get his ass over here and help out already. Rimuru-sama has his own considerations. He doesn't need you to tell him what to do, Tensura responded, adding that bringing Milum-sama back to her senses likely came first. Every battlefield was in a critical state. From her position, Tensura could hardly suggest that he prioritized them over others. Exactly. My liege's judgment is never wrong. Carrere, who had been focusing on attacking, shared Tensura's opinion. Since she wasn't even aware that Rimuru had gone missing, her trust in him remained absolute. However, Carrere did have a grasp on the situation here. Even while turned into an ice statue, she had kept her consciousness extended across the battlefield. That was why she had been able to take aim and fire her judgment. It was business as usual for Carrere to worship Rimuru, but there was one other person here defending him. Gisama, haste makes waste. If we just bide time, Rimuru-sama is bound to arrive. So, shouldn't we just keep Velzard-sama occupied moderately, so we don't get hurt? It was a suggestion typical of Rain, almost as if one could hear the subtext. Come save me. Her intention to gain the benefit without the effort was transparent. And yet, she had a point, which was the annoying part. Besides, the evacuation should be finished soon. Once that's done, Misery can join the fight. Moss and Esprit, too. Rain spoke nonchalantly. She was arbitrarily counting Tensura and Carrere's subordinates as if they were her own minions. She's as shameless as ever, he thought, impressed despite his exasperation. Against a rational Velzard, adding half-baked reinforcements would be meaningless. However, with her currently rampaging, it was a different story. A truly capable fighter could maneuver to avoid Velzard's attacks. As long as they didn't let their guard down, they wouldn't die, making them useful for disruption tactics. Though, whether it was necessary to push themselves that hard was the dilemma. Guy wanted to bring Velzard back to her senses as soon as possible. However, simply exchanging blows would not grant that wish. The fundamental problem was that Velzard's internal state was unknown. Unless he understood that, influencing her from the outside was impossible. He would need to risk detaching his astral body and diving into Velzard's inner consciousness to connect with her heart core. But if he tried that now, there was a high probability his defenseless physical body would be destroyed. It wasn't that Guy didn't trust Tensura and the others, but rather that he knew Velzard's danger all too well. Just maintaining the status quo, as Rain suggested, was an option, but... Guy, would you be able to bring Velzard-sama back to her senses? Tensura asked this while displaying the divine skill of cancelling out the mindless Velzard's onslaught using nihility. Yeah, I can. But not while fighting like this. That was Guy's honest, unvarnished opinion. Hearing Guy's reply, Tensura thought, that figures. Like her, Guy was also utilizing nihility to contend with Velzard. It was frustrating that he had mimicked the technique just by seeing it, but in this situation, it was also reassuring. As someone like Guy said it was impossible, there was no room to doubt his word. After all, Tensura had her hands full just controlling nihility. To intervene in Velzard's rampage while doing so would be nothing short of suicide for her as well. I suppose having Rimuru-sama help really is the best option. Relying entirely on Rimuru felt shameful to Tensura. And even more than that, it was infuriating beyond measure that Rain's thoughtless suggestion turned out to be the best one. She wanted to heave a sigh, but the sense of hopeless despair had vanished. Realizing this, Tensura gave a wry smile. Let us wait for Rimuru-sama. Guess that's our only choice. Tensura and Guy settled on this course of action almost simultaneously. Carrera nodded in agreement. I agree. It doesn't look like my attacks are working on Velzard-sama anyway. Leaving judgment aside, her normal attacks couldn't breach Velzard's defenses. She wanted to complain about how ridiculously sturdy the dragon was, but unleashing a major technique that might actually work wasn't the right move. This was a battle to restore Velzard's sanity, not to kill her. Well, if one asked whether Velzard would actually become an ally after all that trouble, only God knew the answer. That was something neither Carrera, Guy, nor Tensura could know. Even so, they would do it. Whether she was conscious or rampaging, Carrera couldn't defeat her anyway. For Carrera, following Guy and Tensura's judgment was the best move here. Rain was even more pragmatic about it. Since damage wasn't getting through even from Carrera, who specialized in firepower, anything Rain did would be futile. It would likely be the same even if Misery and Moss joined the fray. The only one who could defeat her was Guy, and if he had intended to do so, it would have been over long ago. That was why she didn't hesitate. Rain intended to respect Guy's will and fulfill her role in her own way, but if possible, she preferred a plan that prioritized safety and peace of mind. If Rimuru-sama has returned, we should just get his help. I mean, that's absolutely the surest way. That was Rain's true opinion. Rain believed that Rimuru could handle any situation. She went so far as to believe that if he teamed up with Guy, nothing would be impossible. In that case, why risk danger now when they could just wait a little longer? That way, they should be able to achieve their objective with ease. It was the most impure line of thinking, yet it was the truth. It was the reason for Guy and Tensura's irritation, but Rain's thinking was actually the most logical. And so, just as everyone's opinions had mostly aligned. Oh man, am I a little late. I'm just glad you're all safe. Such a carefree voice echoed across the battlefield. With Rimuru's arrival, the tension in the air relaxed instantly.